Hello everyone, it's Brian from Home Painters, and I just wanted to go over some of the top questions that get asked to me regularly on a weekly basis. And the most often I'm going to discuss today is how much it costs to paint my house. And in this case, we're just going to use 2,000 square foot home because that's the typical home, probably one of the bigger homes in Toronto, GTA, and we'll use that as the model going forward. So first of all, I'm just going to go down. I'm going to break it down into sections because this way you get a better idea of how much it costs and where all your costs are lying. So to start off with, at the end of the video, you'll know basically what it's going to cost to paint a typical 2,000 square foot house. And I'm also going to give you tips on how you can also calculate your house cost, the painting for your house, if it's not a 2,000 square foot home, so you can get an idea how much it costs to paint your home. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is the cost. Oh, the other thing I'm going to talk about is variables that affect the cost, because I'm going to give you some ranges, and the ranges are fairly, I mean, they're going to be pretty tight, but they'll be big enough so you'll have an idea of how much it's going to cost. But you're going to know the variables that affect the cost and why it's costing more and why it could. And there's going to be even tips on how you can lower the cost if you decide to have a bit more of a budget and you don't want to go as high in terms of the pricing the pricing model that I'm about to give you. So to start off with, I'm going to start off with walls. Walls are the most common that most people will start with because it's what you see and it's the biggest surface area. And based on, again, a 2,000 square foot home, you're looking at about 225 to 250 starting at per square foot, and $3 would be on the higher end for typical walls in Toronto. So let's just say if it's 2,000 square feet, I'm just going to get my calculator out here. You're looking at starting at around $4,500 to $5,000 for all your walls. And the higher end might be as high as $3 a square foot. So that's an easy calculation, 6,000. So between 5 and 6,000, 4,500 would be the low end, 6,000 would be the high end. Okay. For your trim and doors, in other words, your baseboards, door frames, window frames, as well as doors. And usually, by the way, when you paint your baseboards, unless you're moving, usually you do them all. Like you do the baseboards, door frames, and doors together, because once you paint some of them, the others will look even worse if you don't paint them. So usually all the trim, which is baseboards, door frames, and windows, and then the doors, they start at about 50 cents a square foot to about 1.25 square foot for the trim and doors in your house. So let me just do some quick math here on 2,000. You're looking at about $1,000 starting at, and 2.5, yeah, 2.5 on the higher end. So anywhere from 1,000 to 2.5, $2,500 for all your trim and doors in the typical 2,000 square foot home. The other thing is for ceilings. So ceilings, by the way, are usually the last things on your mind in terms of painting, just because no one really looks up at them unless you're, of course, in a bedroom. Then you notice them more. Or a lot of times people have stucco ceilings and they just don't like the fact that they're yellowed or dirty, and they just want to freshen that up as well. So that starts at $50 cents per square foot. So you're looking at about the same price as your trim and doors, so about $1,000 starting at, and $2 would be on the higher end for your ceilings. And the main factor there would be stucco. So obviously stucco ceilings is more expensive because you got to oil prime them before you paint them, and so to be on the higher end of that. And if it's flat ceilings, you're definitely looking on the lower end of that. So $1,000 to $2,000 for your ceilings on a typical 2,000 square foot home. Closets, generally speaking, closets are a little bigger on a bigger home than a smaller home, but it's pretty much the same price for a typical home in Toronto. So you're looking at starting at about $75 for a closet and $125 for a bigger, like a walk-in closet. Summarized for that would be $300 for the whole house, because typical closets are between 4 and 5 per home. So it's about $300 for a typical for all the closets, and then $600 would be on the higher end. Okay, so just to summarize, I'm going to go over the cost of the general prices in general. For walls, you're looking at $4,500 to $6,000. Trim and doors, and this is again for a 2,000 square foot home in Toronto, 1,000, starting at 1,000, going up to 2,500. And then for the ceilings, starting at around 1,000 and going up to 2,000, depends on stucco ceilings and of course the condition. And then $75 for the closets. You're looking at starting at $75 to $125 for a smaller big closet. So again, that starts at $300 for all your closets to as high as $600. Okay, and I'm just going to do some quick math here. 25, no, 300. So in a nutshell, to do the typical 2,000 square foot home, you're starting at around $7,000, $7,500 and going as high as $8,000 to $9,000. And that all depends on a number of variables. I'm going to go over some of those variables just as a little bit of a bonus. A lot of customers ask me, well, why is the range so high and what factors in? I'm just going to go over actually 9 factors that actually affect the cost of the interior painting of your home. First is the biggest was furniture. So if you have a lot of furniture and a lot of clutter, it really slows us down as painters. So if you can minimize that clutter, would be awesome. The other thing is the amount of prep involved. For example, the amount of plastering. If they're lath and plaster versus drywall, it makes a big difference. Lath and plaster is obviously a lot more expensive than if you go drywall. And then the other thing is for example, caulking on the baseboards, amount of peeling, if there's any plaster damages, or if there's a lot of caulking on new construction, for example, I'm going to get into later, is a lot more expensive as well. Again, prep makes a huge difference, so that can make a huge difference on the price. New construction, as I just mentioned, is a lot more expensive, and the reason why is because whenever you're putting in new construction, there's a lot of prep. In other words, you got to do a lot of filling, sanding in between coats. Usually, especially if you have bare poplar wood, you're looking at 4 coats. So you have to sand, fill, sand, prime in between each coat, and it takes a lot more time. So that price will be actually a lot more than the square footage that I just mentioned. But new construction is a whole different story. So if you're doing a reno, then it's going to be more expensive than those prices I just mentioned. The height of the walls makes a bit of a difference as well. Most homes are about 8 feet high in Toronto. The higher ones are 9 to 10 feet high, and the really high ones are 11 feet, but most of them are between 8 and 9 feet high. So obviously it's more expensive if you go 9 foot versus 8 foot. The other factor that makes a huge difference on your pricing is how many colors. So the typical home in Toronto, we would paint about 4 to 5 colors. So if you're the amount of colors you choose is a lot more than that, like 6 or 7. I've had as many as 12 on a typical 3-bedroom, 2,000 square foot home, and that really makes the work more for us, as well as it costs more in paint. So just mixing and matching, having to go in between colors makes a lot more difference. So if you can get your colors down below 4 and 5 per house, then your chances of getting a lower price is much better. The other thing is how many coats, and this makes a big difference depending on what color you choose. So if you choose, like, let's say if your colors are a medium color now and you're going to a light color, or like an off-white, let's say Decorator's White CC20, Benjamin Moore, common one, Oxford White's another one. There's a good chance it might take 3 coats. So go from light to dark. You're going it's going to be potentially 3 coats, and that's going to add cost to the price as well. The other, just as a warning, if a lot of customers ask me about whites, I'm going to get in, that's a whole nother video, but the whites to avoid, if you want to avoid having to go 3 coats, are Simply White. I believe it's OC, can't remember that number, sorry, OC 117 I think it is. And the Chantilly Lace is OC 65. That one's a terrible color covering paint. Nice color, nice bright white, but terrible to cover. And the other one by Benjamin Moore is called Cotton Balls. I can't remember that number, but that's those are the 3 most obvious ones that definitely you need 3 coats for sure. So try to avoid those ones if you want to avoid the 3rd or 4th coat price for that. The other thing is time of year. So our slow season is generally from November till March. So if you can get us during our slower seasons, there's a much better chance of getting a little better of a deal than if you go during our busy season, which is from April till the end of October. The other one is time constraint. A lot of times customers are in rushes to get the job done on weekends or at nights, and especially when they're moving in or selling. So if you could give us a little bit of time flexibility, it makes a huge difference. And we do have 1 and 2 day painting services, but again, puts more strain on our operations. So if you want a better deal, much better to give us the option of, starting and finishing when we can. And the last one I'm going to talk about is existing job conditions. For example, oil. If you have existing oil versus latex, oil is a lot more to prime and paint and sand down. So if your existing trim, for example, is oil, then it's going to be more expensive as well. So hopefully I gave you some tips on how to get a better price on your interior, and also to figure out if it's going to be on the higher or lower end of those numbers I gave. Again, this is based on a typical home in Toronto or the GTA, and it's a 2,000 square foot home. And hopefully with those numbers and formulas, I gave you some tips on how you can figure out the general cost of your interior paint as well in Toronto. Okay? Hopefully you enjoyed it, and thanks a lot for listening.